I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the Israeli Air Force strikes Syria for the third time in the last 3 days. A political dispute is threatening to break up Israel's current government coalition. And sit tight, history lovers, because yet another archaeological discovery has been made in the Holy Land. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Tensions are escalating even more between Israel and Syria, especially since last night the Israeli Air Force struck more Hezbollah targets along the Syrian-Lebanese border. ILTV's Aaron Porras joins us with more details. Aaron?
Thank you, Natasha. The strikes marked the second air raid in one day, in less than 24 hours, and the third since the beginning of the weekend. According to Syrian media sources, the Israeli Air Force was targeting Hezbollah weapons convoys and Syrian military sites, but Israel has yet to confirm these claims. Let's check it out.
The first attack over the weekend was Friday, as Israel hit an arms cache on its way to the Lebanese-based terror group Hezbollah. Earlier yesterday, in the second strike, an Israeli drone allegedly killed Yasser al-Sayed, a member of a Syrian pro-Assad militia. On Friday, Syrian air defenses fired back on the Israeli jets, but the missiles were intercepted by the Israeli Arrow system. Speaking to Israeli radio, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that, quote, "The next time the Syrians use their air defense system against our planes, we'll destroy them without the slightest hesitation," end quote.
In related news, a Syrian ambassador to the UN has responded to the Israeli airstrikes over the weekend, calling them terrorist operations. Aaron, how is the Israeli ambassador responding to this?
It's a very good question. Israeli UN Ambassador Dani Danon is firing back this morning, saying in a statement, quote, "It is the peak of hypocrisy for the ambassador of a regime that massacres its own people to be leveling such accusations at us," end quote.
Let's check out your report.
Danon continued in line with Israel's Defense Minister Lieberman's earlier vow to keep weapons away from Hezbollah, that, quote, "Israel will continue to defend its citizens and will act against any attempt to harm them," end quote. In a separate comment, Lieberman said that Israel will continue to stop arms shipments to Hezbollah, and that, quote, "On this there will be no compromise," end quote. He went on to say that the Syrians must understand that they are held responsible for these arms transfers to Hezbollah, and that if they continue to allow them, then we will do what we have to do.
It's only been 2 years since the last national elections in Israel, but a brewing disagreement in the coalition may now bring about another round of balloting in the near future. The heart of the matter is whether to open a new public television station in place of the existing IBA Israel Broadcasting Authority. The closure would mean the loss of jobs for over 1,000 employees. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reversed his position on the closure over the weekend, which puts him at odds with his key political partner, Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon. Netanyahu is now digging in and even suggesting that if the impasse isn't resolved, he may be willing to call new elections over the issue. The IBA workers are staging nearly nonstop demonstrations to save their jobs. Here's what one had to say about the potential early balloting.
Yes, there's a big chance that the government is going to fall over this issue and what it represents.
The finance minister is maintaining silence, but as a prime minister, Netanyahu flew off to China for a 3-day official visit. He insisted that his government must follow the lead of his ruling Likud party.
ממשלה מתקיימת על סמך הסכמים קואליציוניים. בהסכם הקואליציוני נקבע במפורש שכל המפלגות מחויבות להחלטות של הליכוד שלנו בנושא התקשורת, לרבות סגירת התאגיד.
For now, talk of a coalition crisis and possible early elections are dominating Israeli newspaper headlines as commentators scramble to decipher the premier's next move. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with the Times of Israel editor David Horowitz to see whether or not the dispute between the Israeli Prime Minister and Finance Minister will really bring about early elections. Horowitz says that he's doubtful the issue will bring down the government.
The bottom line of all bottom lines, Netanyahu wants to remain in power. Does he calculate that if he sends Israel back to elections, essentially we've now been on every 2-year kind of routine, 2 years after the last elections, that people will allow him to persuade them that he had to do this? I don't think so. And therefore, leaving aside the essence of the dispute, I can't imagine that his calculation is that it will benefit him and the Likud to have an election 2 and a bit years after the last one.
And if they do go to new elections, it's the second time in 2 years that there'll be election over the issue related to communications. Relating to the last one was about the newspaper, making it illegal to have this free newspaper given out that was owned by Sheldon Adelson, a friend of Netanyahu. And this time, over the Broadcast Authority, Netanyahu sat with the workers over the weekend and seemed to be persuaded by them. Do you buy any of that?
No. There's been an endless saga about the state broadcaster and this overfunded, inefficient state broadcaster, and it couldn't be reformed, and therefore you had to set up a whole new authority. It's been playing out for years now, and people have been hired and stuff. I mean, there's no logical reason why there would have been some moment of revelation at the weekend. This has all been unfolding for a long time. And then the notion that because legislation is going through or processes are going through that you don't like, you tear up all the cards and you go back to the country again. You know, if you were talking about existential issues, if you were talking about cardinal strategic decisions on the well-being of Israel, you know, are we going to do a peace treaty with Assad in Syria, and there's a huge argument, and the only way to solve it, you know, is a referendum or national elections or some huge move with the Palestinians and so on. I think people would have some empathy for the notion, but for the second time in two and a bit years, to throw everything away because a particular process, relatively important though it might be, is not unfolding the way you want it to be, it just seems absurd to me.
Isaac Herzog, the leader of the opposition, seems to feel that there can be an alternative government that can rule instead of Netanyahu without going to elections. You can do math. Do you see any constellation where he can put together a coalition that would govern instead of Netanyahu?
I see no arithmetic that is helpful to Isaac Herzog. Obviously, he doesn't want elections because his party won, 24 seats in the last election, and the polls are showing them down at 10 and 11, so he doesn't want new elections, so he has to talk about alternative coalitions. He's the leader of the opposition by virtue of what happened a couple of years ago. If we had elections today, you know, the polls show that he would be much more marginal, and therefore that's what's motivating him. But no, I don't see a credible process by which he heads an alternative coalition. Absolutely not.
And throwing out Kahlon because you're upset with him, can Netanyahu put together a different coalition without Kahlon?
Yeah, I don't see those numbers either. I mean, I assume Netanyahu is betting that Kahlon, who's also not doing terribly well in the polls, would want to avoid new elections as well. But it's the whole thing, you know, it's just, it blew up in a few days. And then the Prime Minister, you know, flew off to China, right? So the whole country's talking about, oh my goodness, what's going on here? And, you know, he's thousands of miles away doing, you know, his...
But he'll be back and he says he'll deal with it during the Passover holiday.
I'm sure he will. But I mean, it's ridiculous. This is not, you know, we have real issues in this country. And it is silly that even you and I have spent this much time talking about it. It's not things of essential centrality to Israel. And I just think it would be ridiculous if this crisis turns out to be something that leads to elections.
As we just mentioned, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is in Beijing on a historic trip aimed at bolstering ties with China, the world's largest trading partner. During the visit, the Israeli premier will be meeting with top Chinese political leaders.
אני יוצא עכשיו לביקור בסין בהזמנת ממשלת סין. אני אפגש שם עם הנשיא, עם ראש הממשלה. אנחנו נציין 25 שנים לכינון היחסים בין ישראל למעצמה הגדולה הזו.
During the political talks, Netanyahu is expected to discuss several critical issues in the Middle East, specifically regarding Iran and Syria, but trade and commerce will loom large. And the premier is not going to do it by himself. He's bringing the largest ever Israeli business delegation to ever visit China. 5 ministers and a whopping 90 business people will join Netanyahu during meetings with the heads of China's biggest corporations, including the multi-billion-dollar internet giant Baidu.
This is also an opportunity for the Prime Minister to again make it clear that Israel wants to cooperate with China, that Israel wants investment from China. This is very important that they hear it loud and clear from the person who's holding the top position in Israel.
While the Israeli leader is in China, he'll be signing several major economic pacts ahead of the free trade agreement between the two nations, which is set to be implemented this coming July. Could Israel become the world's 15th largest economy? Well, one Israeli minister says that the country's aim is to do that and that the government is hoping to make it happen by 2025. Economy and Industry Minister Eli Cohen says that Israel's power depends on its economic growth. So far, the country is doing remarkably well. Right now, China is Israel's largest trading partner in Asia and the third largest in the world. Just 25 years ago, Israel's total trade volume with China stood at $50 million a year, and today it tops $11.35 billion. And an Israeli delegation currently in the Asian nation wants to see that amount doubled. They also want to increase Israeli exports to China, which currently add up to $3.18 billion a year. And if the free trade agreement begins in July as expected, those numbers will skyrocket. As Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu headed east, his chief of staff went west. Yoav Horowitz is now in Washington to work out a clear understanding with the White House about Israeli settlement building in the West Bank and Jerusalem. We all remember U.S. President Donald Trump telling Netanyahu to hold back on construction for a while during the Israeli leader's own visit to the American capital in February. Since that time, the premier has held several talks on the issue with U.S. Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt in Jerusalem. The envoy will be participating in the current round of meetings, along with Israel's Washington ambassador Ron Dermer. The fact that the premier dispatched his chief of staff to the U.S. rather than accompany him to China highlights the importance of the negotiations with the Trump administration. Netanyahu has been actively trying to avoid any friction with Trump over the settlement issue. In fact, he's been pushing a Knesset committee to delay its vote on legally annexing the Ma'ale Adumim town to Israel, which is just outside of Jerusalem and is currently scheduled for next week. He's also informed the Israeli Security Cabinet that the replacement settlement for the residents of Amona may not happen until he gets a green light from Washington. When the illegal outpost was demolished last month, the government had promised to build the first entirely new settlement in 25 years to house the evacuees. The terrorist who brutally murdered the American teen Ezra Schwartz and two others has now been given 4 life sentences by an Israeli military court. ILTV's Aaron Porras has a report on the story.
Mohammed Abed Odu Harub is the name of the murderer who killed Schwartz, along with Yaakov Dan, aged 51, and Shadi Arafa, aged 24. Harub opened fire on the victims from inside a vehicle at a Etzion junction in the West Bank in November 2015. Harub has also been ordered to pay the families of each victim $200,000. Schwartz was in Israel on a gap year program studying at Yeshiva Shreinu in Bet Shemesh. He was killed whilst delivering snacks to Israeli soldiers stationed in the West Bank. Yaakov Dan was a longtime teacher and resident of Alon Shvut, and Shadi Arafa was a Palestinian resident of Hebron. They too were victims of Harub's shooting attack.
Jerusalem investigators have just discovered that the Palestinian assailant who wounded 2 Israeli police officers outside of the Old City last week belonged to a terror cell. Now it's just been publicized that his co-conspirators have been arrested for using the WhatsApp social media platform to coordinate attacks. In Arabic, the WhatsApp group is called the Path to Heaven in an apparent reference to the jihadist ideology that any Muslim who murders an infidel, Jew or Christian is guaranteed entrance to paradise. Once Israeli investigators realized a 25-year-old Arab killed during last week's knife attack belonged to the WhatsApp group, they dug deeper. They then found out that the chat format was being used to share extremist religious views. Several of the participants, including the assailant, are believed to have recently become radicalized Muslims. All 18 of the remaining participants have been apprehended and charged with conspiracy to commit a crime. The suspects are all residents of East Jerusalem and the West Bank. It's well known that thousands of Jews from all over the world began to make the dangerous and risky journey to settle in Israel both during and after the Holocaust. Well, now a C-46 carrier plane from the 1947 Operation Michael Berg has just been returned to Israel, reminding us of some of these incredible stories. Joining me in the studio today is Shlomo Hillel, the former Speaker of the Knesset, the President of the Society for Preservation of Israeli Heritage Sites, and the active commander during Operation Michael Berg, and he's going to tell us more about our amazing history. It's such an honor to have you here with us today. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
All right, so let's begin with Operation Michael Berg. What was this operation?
After the Second World War, there was a lot of illegal immigration. People, after the Holocaust, they tried to come to leave Europe where they had nowhere to go back. but the British intercepted the ships and sent them either to Atlit or to Cyprus later on,
Right.
and they didn't let them in. We had at that time a lot of illegal immigration by sea, people who came from Europe. We also had illegal immigration by land for people who came from Arab lands like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, etc. But till 1947, we never experienced any illegal immigration by plane.
Right.
So in 1947, it was the first time that we decided and we tried and we succeeded in bringing illegal immigration by plane when the British were expecting to look on the sea to find the ships they wanted to intercept them, and they didn't think, it didn't occur to them that we can use...
Look into the sky.
That's right. So that's how we were successful. As a matter of fact, we had 3 flights like that at that time.
How many people were on these flights?
In each flight, 50 people.
Wow. And where were they coming from specifically?
The first time I was the commander, we were sent to Baghdad, to Iraq, the most dangerous place.
Which is where you were born, actually.
Exactly. And I was also on a mission before that for more than a year. So I was supposed to know the area, etc. So I was to bring the first time in 1947, in August 1947.
And this wasn't only just risky because you were bringing these immigrants in via flight, but also because you had to get them from these territories.
The most
right?
dangerous thing was to organize the operation in Iraq.
On the ground?
Yeah, because you can just imagine if it would have failed, it would have been gallows for all of us, not for 1 or 2.
So tell us about this plane that disappeared, and now we've just recovered it. How was it found?
No. The plane was used during the Second World War, American plane, during the military plane that has no seats. When we are speaking about plane,
Right.
it had no seats at all. It was during the Second World War, used by the American Army. And then after the war, there have been some pilots, very brave and very experienced pilots, that after the war, they hesitated what to do. They didn't want to go to become clerks, etc. So they started going from one place to using what they learned during the army, and to smuggle things like gold or like
Goods, yeah.
all kinds of things. And all of a sudden they heard that in Palestine, we were ready to pay for smuggling people. So they just came here to Palestine in 1947 when the British were still here. And they said that they will take 100 pounds, British pounds in those days, which, for each passengers, 50 passengers, which meant about 5,000 pounds in those days, which means $20,000. That in our currency today, this would have meant about $500,000.
What happened with the C-46 more specifically?
It went back to the United States. It continued to do smuggling from here and there. And as a matter of fact, now, when we decided in our society for preservation of historical sites, and we have in Atlit, which is the place that the British would send the illegal immigrants, and we have already a ship that gives the example of the people who came by ship. We decided to bring the first plane in order to tell the story of illegal immigration by ship, by land, and by air. So we managed to get the plane and to send it from Alaska to Seattle in Washington, from there to China, from China to the Canal Suez, like Marco Polo all around the world.
Wow.
And only about a couple of weeks ago, it arrived to Atlit, to the detention camp of refugees, the people that the British would send there in order the illegal immigrants were sent to this detention camp in Atlit.
So now we can finally really get to see this piece of history, which is so important to us. Now, thank you so much for coming in and for doing everything that you did to fight for the state of Israel, and we will be seeing you soon.
Thank you very much, and God bless.
What a pleasure. All right, there's a lot of buzz in Israel today that the next main gay pride parade in Israel is going to be held in Jerusalem. That initiative is sure to be controversial, and we'll tell you why. Until now, the central event has always been held in Tel Aviv, which is usually described as one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. Jerusalem, on the other hand, isn't so much. The capital's ultra-Orthodox population is largely opposed to non-traditional lifestyles, and there's been violence in past years at smaller marches that have been held in the city. A 16-year-old girl was stabbed to death at the 2015 Gay Pride Parade by an ultra-Orthodox extremist. The assailant had only just been released from 10 years in prison for stabbing 3 others at the same march in 2005, who fortunately survived. Activists at the Jerusalem Open House for Pride and Tolerance say they've been spearheading efforts to move the big parade so that it can serve as a protest on behalf of equal rights for the LGBT community. A more celebratory parade will still go ahead in Tel Aviv too on consecutive days. However, it appears at this point that these plans haven't yet been coordinated with Jerusalem Mayor Nir Barkat. Last year, he refused to attend the parade in his city so he wouldn't offend his religious constituents. So stay tuned and we'll be sure to let you know what happens next. All right, Israeli sports fans are thrilled today following reports that hometown basketball star Omri Caspi has recovered from an injury and is very close to signing on with the NBA's Minnesota Timberwolves. ESPN is reporting that Caspi is in Minneapolis right now to discuss the deal after the team's coach personally recruited him over a dinner in New Orleans. The 6'9" forward is the first Israeli who's ever played in the U.S. National Basketball Association. Unfortunately, he was waived by the New Orleans Pelicans last month after suffering a broken thumb during his debut game. It looked like he'd be out for the season, but the b-ball sensation bounced back far faster than anticipated. Now he's able to return to the court for the last 3 weeks of regular season. A number of teams are said to be competing for his favor, including the Boston Celtics, Memphis Grizzlies, and the Los Angeles Clippers. But Caspi's #1 pick appears to be the Timberwolves. His illustrious career began here in Israel, playing with the championship Maccabi Tel Aviv team. After making himself available for the NBA draft in 2008, the Israeli athlete has had several year stints with the Sacramento Kings, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Houston Rockets before being traded to the Pelicans. This past season, he averaged 5.9 points and 4.1 rebounds in 19 minutes of play per game. All right, now get this, a cache of 9 bronze coins have been found in the Holy Land that are over 1,400 years old. It turns out the discovery dates all the way back to the 7th century CE, just around the end of the Byzantine period. Cool, right? The coins bear the images of 3 important Byzantine emperors, Justinian, Maurice, and Phocas. It's believed that the coins were minted in Constantinople, Antioch, and Nicomedia around 1,400 years ago. The excavations began last June and exposed a large 2-story structure and a complex wine press. According to the director of the excavation from the Israeli Antiquities Authority, the hoard indicates the end of the site. The historical background to its having been hidden is apparently related to the Sassanid Persian invasion that occurred in 614 in the Common Era. This invasion was one of the factors that culminated in the end of the Byzantine rule in the land of Israel. Essentially, the excavation suggests that residents in the area buried their money because they were afraid of an imminent danger like an invasion.
The Hebrew word of the day is brought to you by the University of Haifa, Hebrew Summer Ulpan, open to everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. They say when you're not sure, you should just flip a coin, because while the coin is in the air, you'll probably end up realizing which side you're hoping for. So today's word is matbea, which means coin in Hebrew. We all love money, but there's nothing more annoying than a heavy wallet that won't close because it's filled with too many matbeot. Well, if that happens to be the case for you, try to remember there are 2 sides to every matbea, so you should probably just appreciate that you even have matbeot to weigh down your wallet. However, I will give you an important lesson to learn when you come to Israel and eat out. When you pay for your bill, try not to leave too many matbeot in the tip, because over here, waiters and waitresses hate receiving 5 and 10 cent coins. I know how snobby that sounds, but it's the truth, so just try saving your matbeot to take home as a souvenir. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy with a chance of light rain and a low of 54 or 12 degrees Celsius. You can expect some clouds and a rise in temperatures for tomorrow with a high of 68 or 20 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.63 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. Thanks for watching and see you next time.